All right, and good afternoon. I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin. We're going to kind of do a deep dive of our severe weather threat for Saturday, and we can get a little bit more into the details, a little bit more into the meteorology as to exactly why the threat level for severe storms has increased now for our region. We're going to start, though, with Friday night. That's as the system really starts to gain strength and starts moving across the Great Plains. On Friday, the greater risk of severe weather is much more removed to our north. However, the Storm Prediction Center does place us under a low-end threat for Friday night. Maybe a few isolated storms. This is one model, our HER model, which does tend to be a little bit more aggressive. And note, by the late evening and night, it has some rogue thunderstorms or at least heavy showers popping up. The atmosphere would be primed for maybe some of those to become strong to severe, but a very low threat. Again, for Friday night, just don't want to surprise you if you are out and about on Friday. We're expecting at least a few isolated, if not spotty to scattered showers through the night, and some of those, again, fairly limited, could become strong to severe. The main focus, though, is on Saturday, and a more unusual, not exactly rare, but it tends to be maybe once every couple of years do we see a level 4 threat of severe storms and a widespread hatched area. The hatching means this is the region where strong, meaning EF 3, 4, or 5, and long duration tornadoes are possible. Not guaranteed, but possible. So when you have the hatched area and that level 4 out of 5 to include the metro area, river parishes, beyond Baton Rouge to almost Lafayette, North Shore, all of our North Shore parishes, all of our Mississippi counties, it is something that we need to pay very close attention to. Let's break it down. Here's what is going to be the triggering mechanism for these storms. Big upper level low now moving into California. So when these upper systems are still out over the ocean, we have kind of limited data to analyze them. Once they start moving on land, far more information is being able to be entered into computer models, and we have better forecasts, and that is why the Storm Prediction Center did kind of increase that threat. We're going to be watching this upper system, but this is what I want to pay attention to. This feature right now has not really tapped into ample moisture. Yes, certainly moisture coming in from the Pacific Ocean, but what it's waiting on is tapping into that deep, moisture-rich Gulf of Mexico moisture. That is where it really starts to intensify. So as this system progresses across the plains, it starts tapping into that energy. So what we're showing you here is the upper level pattern. So there's that big upper low, as well as the severe weather energy. It's called CAPE. That is where we have the more primed atmosphere for severe storms. So even beginning on Friday, as I mentioned, we do have that low-end threat for severe storms, but the main energy is going to be well removed to our north. That's why more of that severe threat is across kind of the St. Louis, Missouri part of the country. As that upper low, however, moves north, notice what is in its wake. This upper trough, this little trough axis right here, this looks to be what really helps to trigger our storms going into Saturday. And notice the highlighted area, southeast Louisiana into Mississippi, eventually shifting into Alabama. So I think we are going to be more of the springboard for these storms to fire up and then continue deeper into Mississippi and Alabama. Here are some of the ingredients that we're looking toward. As we approach Friday, more and more moisture surging in from the Gulf. You can already feel the increase in humidity. That will continue through the day tomorrow and into Saturday. So Saturday morning, rich moisture from the Gulf. That will have dew points more into the 70s. That's one of the big ingredients to get that severe weather. Another is a well-defined dry line, meaning very dry air on the west side, very moist air. We're in the battle zone, unfortunately, to those competing air masses. That moisture is going to help to fuel the storms that will be developing starting Saturday morning. What'll be a little bit more complicated with the forecast timing itself is that I'm going to show you in just a few minutes some of the models. We don't really track a line of storms necessarily moving in. It'll be a line that starts to fire up just off to our west. So until that occurs, we may kind of miss the timing by an hour or two, but it still looks to be generally late morning through the afternoon and evening. Now, the good news is not an all-day event. Early morning, I think we're still going to be fairly dry. It'll be late morning, more toward 9-10. We start to see some storms developing through the afternoon, and probably by about 5-6 o'clock, most of the storms on Saturday ending. So Saturday night plans, I think, are going to be okay. And then certainly by Sunday, here's that dry air moving in. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday looking phenomenal with low humid air. What this is showing, I don't know, it's just a lot of colors right now. It's the supercell development potential. What a supercell thunderstorm is a large rotating thunderstorm. So you're definitely going to get the strong winds and potential for hail, but also the potential for tornadoes. What I'm also showing you here is two different levels of the atmosphere and the winds. The white are the surface winds, the red are the winds aloft. When you see them coming in two different directions like this, that is wind shear. So this is where you would get rotation in the atmosphere and where you could get rotating thunderstorms. And notice, even late Friday night is where our model starts. We are in a somewhat hospitable atmosphere for severe storms, which is why we have that level 1 threat for Friday night. Now that increases early Saturday morning, but something I want you to note, we are really in the most primed atmosphere early Saturday morning. It may not be that the storms arrive until late Saturday morning as the environment around us starts to weaken a bit. So this is only showing how the conditions in the atmosphere are. It's not showing you the storms themselves. So what is just interesting to note is the supercell ingredients actually start weakening as the line of storms move our way, which could be a great sign of maybe not widespread severe storms. I don't want to second guess the Storm Prediction Center because they are placing us under a level 4 threat. I'm just showing you what I see, and that is that the primed atmosphere for severe weather may be earlier than the storms themselves even arrive. Not to say we wouldn't see any severe weather, but it certainly would be maybe a little bit more in our favor. The same goes for the ingredients for tornadoes. That risk is highest early in the morning before the storms arrive. Remember, we're probably not going to see the storms until maybe 10, 11 o'clock, and it may be that those storms really miss the primed atmosphere for severe storms. Again, I don't want to say we're not going to see anything because I do think we will see quite a bit, but it just may be that the atmosphere is on a weakening trend before those active storms really start rolling in. Not to say, because this is still a very healthy environment for tornadic storms, it just may be kind of missing the best of the atmosphere for severe weather, which again would work in our favor. So here's a look at our precision cast model. We start increasing our cloud cover overnight tonight. This is not something that we show very often. This is a dry line. It is not a front. It's just a line of very dry air to the very moist air. That usually can be a trigger for severe weather. However, it really is not going to trigger any severe storms per se in Texas. It won't be until they start developing in Louisiana. And notice, 10:30, we're still relatively dry with maybe a few storms in the central Florida parishes, so approaching the North Shore. At this time, that's when we start to see more of the storms after 11, 12, 1 o'clock. That is also when the atmosphere is weakening a bit for the severe thunderstorms from supercells, as well as the ingredients for more tornadoes. So again, things that are working in our favor. The Storm Prediction Center is still placing us under a level 4 out of 5 threat, which is unusual. I'm just showing you what I am seeing on the models, and hopefully this is a trend which continues. 3:30, we've got that line of storms rolling in. Metro area maybe more so between 4 to 5 and 6, and then quickly moving on after about 7 or 8. May still be just a coastal concern and in parts of southern Mississippi by 8:30. So later into the night Saturday, we're already seeing improving conditions, and then the front doesn't move in until probably more so early Sunday with dropping temperatures and dropping humidity, and then much better weather. Something else to note, and one thing that was a concern for the Irish Channel Parade, we're going to be the winds. Even before the storms arrive, those winds will be picking up. During the day tomorrow, they're going to be sustained 10 to 20 and gusting at times to about 25 miles an hour. That's tomorrow. So windy already, and windier still by Saturday. Winds sustained over 20 miles an hour and gusting up to near 40 at 7 a.m. on Saturday. So we're going to start the day off with those strong winds, and they will be gradually increasing as we continue through the day. And obviously with the line of storms, there will be the risk of strong straight line winds, tornadoes, and even hail. So primarily we're looking at a timing from late morning through the afternoon. Strong winds, tornadoes, but even hail potential. Have a way to get those weather alerts. If there is one silver lining, is that these storms are moving in during the daylight hour. So this is not something that you're going to be sleeping and when to be woken up with an alert. You will be up and aware of the weather, because believe me, you'll hear the winds and you will certainly hear and see as the storms are arriving. So if there is one positive, is that it is occurring during daylight hours. So while folks are still out and about, at least you are more weather aware during the day than you would be if this was coming in during the overnight hours. And again, overnight Saturday, improving conditions, and Sunday is looking gorgeous. Katie?
A lot of questions on social media about Sunday's forecast in particular, because of course we do have that Old Metairie parade that's rolling. I'm riding in it. I'm excited about it. And a lot of people are making their plans also for the rescheduled Argus parade, which was canceled because of also weather concerns on Mardi Gras Day. So lots and lots of people concerned about the Old Metairie forecast. And you just said it's looking like that is going to be picture perfect. Now, Chris, one of the things that people do before that parade, however, is load floats, decorate floats, do all of those types of things. And that usually happens on Saturday before. So timing wise, what are our best chances there? In the morning?
Yeah, maybe early morning. As I mentioned, early morning, we're going to have the threat of the strong winds.
Yes.
So probably not ideal conditions. And you're not going to have a ton of time in the early morning, as the winds will already be gusting up over 30 miles an hour. So this is kind of looking at late Friday night, and then here we go into early Saturday morning. So, trying to do some float decorating with winds sustained of 20 miles an hour and gusting up to 40, probably not great. And then of course, you don't want any of these floats then damaged once the storms roll on through, as we'll still have the strong winds out of the south, and then associated with the thunderstorms, winds could be gusting over 60 miles an hour. Again, to try and find a window on Saturday to do any decorating, it may not be, unfortunately, to maybe more late afternoon, evening, once these storms have already passed. I would say the best option for decorating is wait till the storms have passed.
Okay, so usually when this happens, we have that strong line of storms that'll move through, and it's pretty quick. Are you expecting that in this scenario? Or, like you just said, those winds are going to continue to pick up, and then we're going to see that big line of storms?
One thing that actually would have worked in our favor is if we had seen more thunderstorm development during the morning hours of Saturday. What that does is it kind of stabilizes the atmosphere. It kind of cuts off some of this deep moisture flow from the Gulf, and would maybe limit the amount of storm intensity from later in the afternoon. Models are looking less and less likely that we would see many thunderstorms kind of firing up ahead of the line. So it does look like we're going to be mostly dry early on Saturday, and then probably seeing more of that line setting up by about 10 a.m., maybe just off to our west, or maybe even impacting already the North Shore parishes, especially Livingston, St. Helena, Tangi, and then increasing and more of a linear kind of setup as we head into the noon hour. Then notice this is going to be fairly quickly moving as we get through the afternoon and evening. And it's going to be a few hours to going to go through. And notice there is even indications where the line doesn't necessarily stall, but intensifies as it moves through southeast Louisiana. Notice where we have some of the stronger storms, even as of 5:30, a little bit more removed into Mississippi, Alabama, where I do think we're going to probably see more of a potential tornadic outbreak. Now, I do want to say, usually the times that we would see any of those strong tornadoes, like we've seen out on the West Bank a couple of years ago, the one out in New Orleans East a few years prior to that, are usually in these heightened levels of severe weather. So while we don't necessarily see, and it is very rare to see a quote-unquote tornado outbreak in southeast Louisiana, this is usually the kind of environment where we would see some of those maybe one or two stronger tornadoes.
And what's the timing on that? You think it's going to be along with that line, or could those, obviously they're associated with thunderstorms,
right?
So it's going to be associated with that line.
It's going to be more along that line. So kind of timing it out, probably starting around the 11 o'clock hour. Let's say we'll go to 10 o'clock just to be safe, and then continuing past 5, 6 o'clock. I think by 7 and 8, we'll see the atmosphere kind of much, much weaker to develop severe weather, and the line already moving out of the area.
Yeah, somebody on Facebook commented, do we ever just see regular storms anymore? Just thunderstorms? Typically in the past, we would have just seen these parades roll anyway. Now we're seeing these tornadic threats that are happening over and over again, it feels like.
Well, that's certainly the threat for this event, as this is a fairly strong upper level system. As we were just showing you, we have very dry air on the backside. We're going to have very humid air, and that's typically what we see March into April for us. This is our kind of severe weather season, as we are kind of in that transition into spring. We can still get the cold air, but we can still very much get into the 80s and very humid, and then we get those big dramatic changes when we see the severe weather. And our forecast models are far better in now forecasting for the potential of tornadoes.
Yeah, and you know what? We're just like, we're special here, right?
We are very special.
We have hurricanes that we have to deal with.
We get it
now,
all.
And now, like this part of the year, the spring season, when we get like 2 or 3 weekends that are gold.
I know.
Unfortunately, this can interrupt it.
Yeah, usually so. And again, with tornadoes, we're kind of southeast Louisiana, with the exception of the North Shore, we're kind of out of that what's considered Dixie Alley, kind of that southern tornado alley. You got the one out in the plains, and then you have the one in the deep south.
Yeah.
It really doesn't include right along the Gulf Coast. So it is unusual to see that level 4 out of 5 threat, but it certainly is something that we need to watch very, very carefully, because the environment will be conducive for the storms that move in to become quickly severe and possibly developing those stronger tornadoes.
Sheila Myers on Facebook said they've been fretting in Career, Mississippi. Any word on what people can expect there? It looks like the stronger end of the storms may actually be moving through that area.
Well, really, all of our area, Mississippi counties included, are under basically the same threat level for severe storms as we go through the afternoon and evening. That level 4 does include, though, the metro area, river parishes, all of our Mississippi counties, all of our North Shore parishes. So if there's any area that is under a slightly lower threat, it's going to be our bayou and coastal areas. But even those areas are under a level 3 out of 5 and are also under that hatched area, meaning the potential of those stronger, long duration tornadoes. So really everyone is under an equal threat of the severe storms.
Yeah, it seems so unusual for this to be happening this time of year, but I guess it's not.
No, this is spring. I mean, we're transitioning into spring, so March, April, even going into somewhat early May is when we start seeing the severe weather setting up across the plains as well as in the deep south. Yeah,
you have been in close contact with the Irish Channel Parade people. You've been talking to them throughout the week. You were planning on marching in the parade, so it's devastating to Chris too that you're not able to do it this weekend.
I got my kilt ready to go. I'm just waiting for the date that they say we're marching. Whenever I'm ready, I'm going.
Okay, you're ready. He's got all the things that go along.
I've got all the setup.
All the things.
I got all the things. Just no bagpipe.
Oh Lord, I would actually pay money to see that. I think.
I don't know if I could play it.
I don't know. I don't know if you're
a practice. You know what? I'll have time to practice before the march.
Okay, that sounds good. But back to the weather. You've really been in close contact with those Irish Channel people, talking to them throughout the week. Walk us through a little bit how that decision was made, because I know a lot of people are disappointed, and everyone had tons of plans this weekend that many of them are now canceled.
This was a fairly well forecasted event. Even going back to last weekend, I was already starting to look ahead at the models, and even then, going back to kind of maybe not as much Friday, but certainly into Saturday and Sunday, it was looking like we were going to see a storm chance. Maybe not ideal conditions even early on, but it was one of those, if it's just rain, we can march. But if it's thunderstorms, even not severe thunderstorms, the folks with the marching clubs are a little bit more hesitant to send people out marching with lightning, as well as for the spectators. As it started to look more and more likely that it was severe weather, I was in contact with them, and they were just more curious about the potential timing. Of course, the timing was going to be during the parade itself. And then I guess there was at one point maybe a consideration of trying to move it a little earlier, because we don't start marching until 1 o'clock. There's a mass at 11:45, and there was a thinking maybe we could do it early in the morning. Not ideal for a bunch of folks having some refreshments early in the morning, but maybe we could have moved it earlier. But then there was the threat of the strong winds, and it's not just marching clubs, there are double-decker floats in the parade. And so with that wind threat early and the storms developing by possibly mid-morning and into the afternoon, it was just the best decision to postpone.
Yeah, so this really is going to be hit or miss all day Saturday. If you have any sort of plans on even parade preparations, like I mentioned, if I got to get my cabbage on that float somehow, Chris, for Sunday.
Yeah,
so
and then
when
the
are we gonna
folks
do that?
in the Irish Channel Parade are now sitting on a metric ton of cabbage and carrots and potatoes. So
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe we can work something out with the Metairie Road Parade and get the vegetables
they
into,
can just give it to
JP.
us.
We'll just get the vegetables into
us
JP.
if they wanted to.
We're going to keep the Jameson. That'll hold. Jameson bottles will hold for a while. The Tullamore Dew is fine. We'll give you the vegetables.
Okay, I see how you roll.
Yeah, because yes, Sunday again. This is not a washout for the entire weekend. Not even all day Saturday. It's just right during the middle of the day. Saturday night will be okay, and then Sunday, as I mentioned, will be gorgeous. And then Monday for the St. Patrick's, the Irish Channel block parties, ideal weather. Temperatures, sunny skies, low humidity, highs only in the lower 70s. I mean, it'll be picture perfect.
That sounds fantastic, although it's just disappointing for Saturday. We are getting some questions on our Facebook stream, on our WWL Louisiana Facebook page. Just everyone wanting to know kind of what is happening in their area, like Ponchatoula and the North Shore, those areas also under this tornado risk. However, where the line of storm sets up is really what's going to determine who gets what, right?
Yes, and I mean, if it was me, you know, based on what the Storm Prediction Center is, and look, these are severe weather meteorologists. This is their area of expertise. The Storm Prediction Center doesn't even dive into ocean forecasting. They don't do hurricane forecasting. This is kind of their specialty. They are experts in the severe weather. So, you know, do want to treat it very seriously, but just based on what we have seen in the past, these tend to be a little bit more of a focus North Shore and moving into Mississippi, Alabama, moving into that Tornado Alley region. But obviously we have seen tornadoes in the metro area. Not too long ago, we had those two that almost took the exact same path on the West Bank, jumping into Araby. So they can certainly happen on the South Shore. It's just more frequent to the North Shore. So I don't want to say that they are just kind of, you know, erring on the side of caution with this threat level from the metro area to the North Shore. But this is something that we do need to take seriously, really all across the area for Saturday mid-morning to the afternoon.
Okay, so just definitely be weather aware. Download our app onto your phone if you don't have it already. Make sure that you're able to get our signal and really keep up to date on what Chris is saying about tornado watches and warnings as they start to pop up. That really is key just for safety reasons. We've seen that time and time again with events like this. This seems pretty unusual to have us all under this high of a tornadic threat. Any idea when the last time it is that we saw?
I'd have to go back and look. That was one thing. I was trying to put my forecast together a little bit faster so we could get on for our streaming update here. But like I said, one thing that really started to jump out, and one thing I started to note in the kind of early stages of this forecast was that I started questioning. I said, we're going to be watching this big upper level low move from the central plains and then move up toward the northern tier states, Minnesota and Wisconsin. So I started to beg the question. I said, while we're going to be on the tail end of this front, the main energy is lifting away from us. So I questioned, you know, just how much severe weather could we see? Well, then we started to get, again, now this system is on land, so the models are doing a much better job. What we're also starting to see is this. This is the upper low at this point is already almost into southern Canada, but what I'm seeing is this little feature right across the plains. This is an upper trough. So this is kind of on the wake of that upper low. You've got this secondary deep upper trough, and that is what is supportive of the severe weather elements, all of the ingredients across the deep south and including southeast Louisiana. So it's not necessarily that upper low per se, but it's the upper low developing this deep upper trough, and we're on the side of greatest instability. You're going to have very strong winds aloft. You have very strong winds at the surface. They're coming in from two different directions. You've almost got a southwesterly wind aloft and almost a southeast to southerly wind at the surface. When you have that change in wind direction as you go higher into the atmosphere, that is wind shear, so that is conducive for those supercell thunderstorms and the possibility of tornadic thunderstorms, and we're right in the crosshairs of that setup for the deep south.
Yeah, that seems pretty unusual for us. It doesn't happen all that often. You know, it's not out of it. It's not like it never happens, but it doesn't happen a lot.
It's rare, but when we are under those heightened level threats, that tends to be when we do see those EF, sometimes 3s, move across parts of our viewing area.
Yeah, let's hope, you know, like the St. Bernard tornadoes that we saw in Araby a few years ago don't
Exactly.
happen
That
again.
went from the West Bank into St. Bernard, Araby. You know, we had some of those storms out in New Orleans East. It was kind of similar
Yeah.
type setups. And certainly those heightened areas of warning from the Storm Prediction Center when we've seen those type of storms.
That seems to be a common path, is coming up that same route, is going up through St. Bernard. And, you know, the one in New Orleans East, I think, took a very similar path to that.
The way the upper pattern is and kind of the way the storms set up, we tend to be, and more typically when we have severe weather, we're kind of, I call it the springboard. We have these storms kind of starting to fire up over southeast Louisiana in the North Shore, and then just as they cross into southwest Mississippi and then further into Alabama is when they start to really take advantage of that more conducive environment and really explode in intensity and strength. But this time it looks like maybe the springboard is a little bit more in the Gulf to where we're now more under the path of some of those intensifying storms.
You know, Chris, not only is this impacting our area, but people in South Louisiana, of course, have travel plans and things like that. We have one person on Facebook, Nathan, asking how it looks, like I said, in Ponchatoula. We have another one, Jamie Houlihan, asking when is this going to hit Orange Beach? So is this going to continue all the way into Alabama, you think?
Yeah, for Alabama and farther east, this is going to be more of a late evening tonight. So for us, it's somewhat beneficial that it's during the day because, again, you are more weather aware. You are not in bed sleeping and then trying to scramble to get to a safe space if there is a tornado warning for your area. So we're more of aware of it during the day, but then it's going to be more of a nighttime issue for areas to the east.
Okay. You know, we're even getting questions about buses and whether or not buses may have an issue as they're driving around on Saturday. You think the winds are going to be strong enough to impact things like that?
It'll be windy, and we'll certainly see likely a wind advisory, so there could be some restrictions on our elevated roads, exposed roads like the causeway. We could see more of the issue there, certainly as we get into the winds will start picking up tomorrow and will already be pretty brisk early Saturday morning before the storms even arrive.
Now, we saw a Mandeville parade switch to Sunday as well. Do you think we're going to see anything else move around as we move through this? I mean, I guess it depends on if something hits and where.
Right. Well, I don't think as far as Saturday goes, seems like everything has already been moved away from Saturday. So I don't think there are any events going on Saturday. Sunday, again, is going to be great. It'll be breezy, but not nearly the winds that we'll see on Saturday. And it'll be less humid, and we're going to see sunny skies. All
right. That sounds fantastic for Sunday. Unfortunate for Saturday.
Yes.
And hopefully they'll get that parade scheduled so you and everybody else involved can really
I will wear my kilt.
Oh, Lord help us. All right. Thanks so much, Chris, for giving us the Q&A this afternoon. And we're going to wrap it up for now. But if you want to get the very latest, you can, of course, catch anytime on WWL Plus or on our newscasts on TV on Channel 4, starting at WWL Louisiana News at 5.